Well, dear viewer, here we go with the Douglas A-4M Skyhawk in 1:48 scale, courtesy of Magic Factory. A kit of no small ambition, let me assure you. This video comes to you in cooperation with PCBWay, Magic Factory and MRP Paints. And so, without further ado, let us embark upon this most noble of pursuits. The ejection seat, a crucial piece of kit should one's aircraft decide to pack it in midair, is assembled first. A masterpiece of minute detail, bristling with crisp textures, particularly along the sides, though tragically much of this fine handiwork will vanish into the cockpit, never to be admired again. The seat cushion possesses a promising texture, though the fabric wrinkles could, in my humble opinion, be more pronounced. Fitment, splendid. All pieces came together as though designed by some divine hand. However, the rubber seat belts. The rubber seat belts. A thorn in the side of this endeavor if ever there was one. Not only they are suspiciously thick, but they also exhibit a downright mulish reluctance to adhere to anything. Glue, persuasion, idle threads, nothing could convince them to stay put. The pull handle, a fiddly little bit of photo etch metal, requires one to fold a tab from the belt over it and affix it in place. This, I can assure you, is a task bordering on the impossible. And even if one succeeds, the result shall look comically out of scale. A valiant attempt was made, but at the end, I took the executive decision to remove the flap entirely. Mercifully, there are no further rubber parts to contend with except for the tires. But let's not dwell on dark clouds just yet. Now we come to a choice that will determine the course of the entire build, early or late production model. I opted for the late variant. Here another decision looms. Shall one embrace the provided decals for the instrument panel and the side consoles, thus simplifying matters, or shall one embark on the more righteous path, selecting the highly detailed plastic parts and relishing in sharp, crisp glory? Naturally, I chose the latter. One must have standards. The assembly proceeded with merciful ease. Everything clicked together like an elegantly arranged dinner party. The cockpit rear bulkhead and tub fit flawlessly, and I find myself tasked with installing a small shelf-like contraption behind it. However, before this can be accomplished, a few ejector pin marks must be vanquished. These lurk in the shadows, but are regrettably just visible enough to warrant their removal. A few swift passes with the standing stick, and order is restored. Moving on, I liberate the nose gear bay and a couple of rather fetching pipes from their sprues, along with a bafflingly small item whose purpose remains for the time being a complete mystery. The pipes, being separate parts, are a welcome sight, as molded-in details never quite manages to capture the necessary sense of realism. The rest of the bay, I am pleased to report, is equally well detailed, promising an enjoyable painting session in due course. The rudder pedals are attached atop of the nose gear bay, following in short order by the cockpit tub, which will in time nestle snugly between the fuselage halves like a well-tailored waistcoat. The fuselage halves are freed from their sprues, and immediately I must embark on a hole drilling expedition. Some of these openings have an evident purpose, others remain a mystery, the instructions being delightfully vague on the matter. Next, a boat of sanding is in order. Two split lines run along the fuselage, both on top and bottom, and these must be expunged with great care. Out comes the sanding stick, and with a delicate touch I smooth away the offending ridges. A higher grit is employed to polish things up, leaving a pristine surface behind. Cockpit side walls are affixed next, fitting with the precision of Swiss watch. This I feel is shaping up rather well. The air brake wells, once installed, present small but irksome gaps along their perimeter. These I fill with acrylic putty, whipping away the excess with a damp cotton buds of various shapes and sizes. How well this will blend, only the primer will tell. The engine inspection ports, being lined with separate internal walls, require a brief scrape to remove mold lines. A quick refinement on the contact surfaces minimizes the chances of future gaps, and I am rather pleased with the outcome. To finish step 3 of the instructions, on the right side intake trunk I installed the skin piece that is probably different for different variants. Otherwise I don't see why it would be a separate detail. Before we go any further, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video. PCBWay offers professional on-demand 3D printing service. They can print your projects in plastic, resin or even metal. They also offer sheet metal and carbon fiber fabrication, CNC machining in a huge array of materials, injection molding and many electronic component solutions. Check them out, link I will leave in the description. Now on to the cockpit painting. This is where things start to get properly interesting. It all started with a layer of black surface primer, upon which I bestowed a coat of flat aluminum in several key spots: the engine, its surroundings and naturally select areas in the cockpit. For the intake components and some of the exhaust I went with insignia white, which, while seemingly a dull choice, gave a crisp and clean contrast. While I had the airbrush in hand and the nose gear bay at the ready, I decided to strike while the iron was hot and paint it then and there. This will necessitate masking it off later when painting the belly of the aircraft, but on the other hand, I had much better access at this stage. Once that was done, I turned my attention to detail painting on the intake and exhaust stages of the compressor. Now, I am well aware that both will most likely remain invisible, but one does like to have a sense of personal satisfaction, so I diligently added some touches of color and depth. I applied satin varnish to the silver areas of the cockpit, which were followed by a medium-strength hairspray. On the next morning, I unleashed the interior green upon it. Then came the grand moment, chipping. Using a brush with a buzz haircut and small amounts of water, I removed the green paint in controlled patches, revealing the silver underneath. Some areas retained their color entirely, but in others the effect was glorious. While watercolor pencil chipping has its merits, I remain loyal to the good old hairspray technique. As I waited for the paint to cure, I assembled the intake and exhaust. A perfect fit, though as expected, visibility in there is going to be as limited as in a London fog. Going back inside the cockpit, I sprayed some Tamiya rubber black over the areas to be chipped. Prior to that, of course, I got some hairspray on these areas. After about 5 minutes, I removed the black, unveiling the layer beneath. Not too bad, not bad at all. A note to fellow modelers: when using the hairspray chipping method with lacquer paints, it is best to start reactivating the hairspray and commence chipping about 10 minutes after the application. I left things to cure overnight and the process became considerably more difficult. With the scuffing complete, I covered the cockpit seals in liquid mask to prevent any unfortunate painting mishaps. The main cockpit color was Mr. Color C317 flat grey. I did not do anything special here, just a nice smooth coat of paint. The detail was excellent, requiring minimal enhancement. I started with Tamiya's dark grey panel line wash, and after whipping away the excess, followed it up with directional dry brushing using white oil paint. A bit of dirt staining may be in order later once I scrutinize my reference images. Allow me to invite you in my Patreon community. You'll get daily updates on my current builds. Those updates include multiple images of my progress along with detailed written explanation of what I did and why I did it. I attempted a daring feat, designing and cutting masks around the dials. Alas, did not go as planned initially. Too much for the machine to handle. The laser cutting function of my X2 M1 turned out to be rather more capable than its knife cutting counterpart. After some trials, I managed a satisfactory result, though some pieces were so minuscule they either vanished into the ether or were singed by the laser. Regardless, I was pleased. Masked and ready, I applied the LP65 rubber black from Tamiya, followed by a flat black on selected panels on the side consoles. Once dry, I gave it all a light dry brushing with neutral grey oil paint. I have probably said this too many times, but I love how smooth and subtle the dry brushing effect is with the oil paint. The same oil paint dry brushing treatment was given to the ejection seat and the gun side base. The instrument panel pads received a fine coat of flat earth. An amusingly dramatic name for a paint, I must say. The moment of truth arrived as I peeled away the instrument panel masks. The result? Not quite the masterpiece I had envisioned, but decent enough. With the oil paint from the dry brushing already cured, I employed a silver watercolor pencil to add paint chipping to the edges. The same treatment was given to buttons and knobs, ensuring they popped nicely. Wherever the area of the bezels of the instrument panels allowed this, I applied some interior grey paint with a brush to give this piece some more variance. For the engine section, I opted for a rather interpretive approach, owing to a lack of definitive reference images. After sealing in the aluminum paint with a varnish, I applied a black wash, let it settle, and then gently removed the excess with white spirit. Certain pipes and boxes received a black coat, followed by highlights in Runefang steel to simulate wear and tear. You know what? Forget about the rubber seat belts. The most infuriating thing I had to do so far was to dissect the one-piece instrument panel so I can extract the instrument faces. I frankly cannot see why the option with separate faces is not included in the decal sheet. Cutting the faces from the group was not that bad, but making the decal in a circular shape, or at least somewhere near that geometrical entity, was not fun at all. After the cutting is done, the application of the decals on the instrument panel was pretty straightforward. And just like that, the instrument face decals went in their respective places in a matter of, if I recall correctly, 2 bench sessions. At the end of the day, I am convinced that the time and effort that I invested in this instrument panel are not in vain. The painting of the ejection seat details started with several layers of olive drop acrylic paint over the cushions. That was followed by a highlight layer on the edges. With a lighter version of the same paint, I attempted to put an emphasis on the wrinkles, but attempted is the key word here. Using a mechanical pencil, I added some shadows under the previously applied highlights to suggest some volume. The seatbelt harnesses received a base coat of interior grey acrylic paint, and then some highlights with lighter and lighter versions of the base color. For a touch of vibrance, I painted the pull handles in yellow. And of course, because that's how they are painted. A little bit of silver paint and the seat belts look complete. A touch of red here and there deemed the painting of the cockpit complete. The ejection seat was a snug fit, requiring some forceful persuasion to settle into place. Here, the glue was a security policy more than it was necessity. The heads-up display, delightfully clear and of good thickness, slotted in without issue. A quick pass with a green marker along its edge gave it that characteristic tinted look. The heads-up display assembly slots nicely into the instrument panel, and the instrument panel slots very nicely into the cockpit tub. The rails on the fuselage sides provide excellent places to secure the cockpit before gluing it, and then with a little bit of glue it stays in place with no gaps whatsoever inside. The burner can, the intake and the engine piece fit inside the fuselage reasonably well. At long last the fuselage halves come together. Some gentle massaging, a bit of coaxing, and they are united, as though they have never been apart. Inside the cockpit everything remains gap-free, though visibility is predictably limited. However, compared to the Corsair kit, seam lines abound. A few evenings with filler and sanding sticks are undoubtedly in my future. And there we have it, chaps. The A-4M build is rolling along nicely, with much still to come. Stay tuned for further adventures in plastic. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, happy modeling, fellas!